back to who's paying who. Income tax. Go to ronpaul.com/taxes to research this further, and you'll find some valid history. Prior to 1913, the government operated with revenues raised through tariffs, excise taxes, and property taxes, without ever touching a worker's paycheck. In the late 1800s, when Congress first attempted to pass an income tax, the idea of taxing a citizen's hard work was considered radical. The masses stood up and spoke up loud and clear. But more importantly, the Supreme Court ruled the income tax was unconstitutional. Another must-see documentary is America, Freedom to Fascism, directed by Aaron Russo. Aaron mysteriously died August 24, 2007, within just 2 weeks after I emailed him offering to help him for free. So I'm naturally suspicious, although he is reported to have struggled with bladder cancer for 6 years, and I just found out about his life-threatening health issue because of an internet post. If you don't already know, my father and I had already become very experienced with what we do to help people who have cancer. I'm not saying that we had 100% success, because it depends on what you define as success, first of all. There are too many variables to even talk that way. And the governing boards, they don't let people talk that way. And we still aren't allowed to make certain specific health claims. But with all the success we've experienced, we've felt we're one of the best options available. That if there was anything out there that could help them, the applied lymphology course could. We've developed a powerful and unique understanding of the cause and prevention of cancer, and we had already done everything we wanted to do with cancer. Because Aaron died so quickly after I offered help, I suspect he may have mentioned it as an option to the wrong person. But I've seen plenty of people die too. Only God knows. Aaron was an award-winning film producer and director and political activist. America, Freedom to Fascism was released in 2006, featuring several figures, yet Ron Paul was the only political figure who was willing to step up and speak the truth. Still, Wikipedia claims it as inaccuracies, distortions, and misrepresentations. Wikipedia can be a good resource for lots of things, but I know from firsthand experience that they have been heavily controlled by agents of our abusers. Part of the problem is anyone can publish anything on Wikipedia. I myself have published facts to give my father credit for his discovery of the sodium-potassium pump, the engine of the cells, and in record time, my edits have always been deleted and replaced with giving too much credit to another scientist in Denmark who never even called it that, because he never put 2 and 2 together to see it as the engine or electric generator of the cell like my father did. So we know how Wikipedia has been infected by our fake news friends. To add clarity on the tax issue, only with the 16th Amendment could Congress gain the ability to tax the productive endeavors of the citizens. But according to the Constitution, income tax is illegal. The Constitution is not that big either. Look at the tax code. It's monstrous. Secretary of State Philander Knox committed fraud when he declared the 16th Amendment ratified on February 25, 1913, just a few days before leaving office. The process took almost the entire term of President William Howard Taft's administration, 1909 to 1913. GiveMeLiberty.org/features/taxes/notratified.htm is a good resource for this. Out of 48 states, 75%, or 36, were required to legally ratify the 16th Amendment. Knox reported 38 states voted for it, which is about 79%. However, there were no more than 20 states, and possibly less, which is less than 42%. So Knox lied by more than 33%. But Knox committed fraud against the entire country. A mega warning. Do not use this argument to try to defend yourself in tax court. The tax courts have responded quite unfavorably to those who've tried that. Congress gave the IRS its power. However, illegally, the IRS acts as though they have every right to do what they do. The solutions for this are in the laws of empowerment, and as soon as enough people are educated with it, there is no place for any abuse to hide anymore. Ron Paul shows us, and evidently he's not alone. It looks like the majority of the masses out there are on his side. Ron Paul fans supported him with the Liberty Tax Amendment legislation, which would repeal the 16th Amendment and eliminate the system altogether. If enough empowered people step up in the right way, with love and understanding, all the abuse will fall away as fast and easy as possible. All we need to shift our lives for the better is spread love and understanding. We can peacefully require things to be set straight. If we live in a democracy, the people deserve their voice, their hearts and minds to be heard. If you still wonder how the government can get by without income tax or the IRS, just read ronpaul.com/taxes. The United States did just fine without a federal income tax for the first 126 years of its history. In the 16th Amendment was a massive fraud, but it was fueled and powered by a much earlier fraud against the Constitution and the citizens of the United States around the turn of the 18th century, which was the very beginnings of the country's existence, which was right after the Constitution took effect in 1789. Evidence of the validity of the original 13th Amendment continues to be uncovered that also suggests that a plot of the wars of that period was actually to bury such evidence forever. Nobility, an order of men in several countries to whom privileges are granted at the expense of the rest of the people. And titles of nobility, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8. No title of nobility shall be granted by the United States, and no person holding any office of profit or trust under them shall, without the consent of Congress, accept of any present emolument, office, or title of any kind whatever from any king, prince, or foreign state. And Section 10, Clause 1 says that no state shall grant any title of nobility. The Constitution sought to prohibit the International Bar Association from operating in the United States, but the Constitution neglected to specify a penalty. So the prohibition was ignored by our adversaries. By the end of the 17th century, the writers of the Title of Nobility Amendment, also known as TONA, had obtained additional experience and insights as to how the British Empire and other European nations conduct their affairs. Therefore, a Title of Nobility Amendment known as the original 13th Amendment that did specify a penalty was proposed in 1789 and again in 1810. Keep in mind, the Revolutionary War between Great Britain and the 13 colonies, which had declared themselves the United States of America, was fought between 1775 and 1783, and the Title of Nobility Amendment was first proposed in 1789. which was the year George Washington became president and when the Constitution first took effect, and again in 1810 under the James Madison presidency. It reads, "If any citizen of the United States shall accept, claim, receive, or retain any title of nobility or honor, or shall, without the consent of Congress, accept and retain any present, pension, office, or emolument of any kind whatsoever from any emperor, king, prince, or foreign power, such person shall cease to be a citizen of the United States, and shall be incapable of holding any office of trust or profit under them, or either of them." Honesty is the first chapter in the Book of Wisdom. Thomas Jefferson. Our founding fathers wanted to give truth and light a chance to see if it could do better than secret abuse. They hoped for a society as pure and utopian as possible. According to the Journal of the Senate of the United States of America, the vote was 26 yeas to only one single nay from a Mr. Smith of New York. The House voted in support 87-3. Such was the strength of the vote in support of the original 13th Amendment. So it was first submitted to the states for ratification April 27th, 1810. With 17 states at the time, 13 states were required to ratify TONA. According to these sites, the facts are a bit confusing, so I'll do my best to add clarity. The Journal of the Virginia Senate Record shows that the resolution to amend was rarified, not ratified, but rarified, May 1st, 1811, and signed by the President of the Virginia Senate. If the word rarified was initially actually the word ratified, it would mean Virginia was actually the 7th state to ratify, May 1st, 1811, making New Hampshire the 13th state to ratify, December 10th, 1812. This has been a major subject of controversy. I don't like to make assumptions or to have to fill in the blanks here. It seems rather strange that the whole record appears tampered with, because it seems clear. Does it seem that the word rarified is simply out of place here? What is it even supposed to mean as found in Virginia's Senate records? Many Old English words are no longer used, but if you look up the definition, you'll discover, as I did, there is no such thing as an actual motion to rarify a resolution to amend. I don't rarify a resolution to amend. I don't think there has ever been an actual legislative motion to rarify anything, let alone an amendment to the Constitution. Is there any other record of any Senate ever using the word rarified in relation to an amendment of any kind, ever in our history, or any country's history? I don't think so. May the word rarified have originally been ratified. Was the T simply changed to an R? Well, the War of 1812 was between the United States and Great Britain, which, whether it was a secret intentional plan or not, produced enough chaos to bury a lot of evidence, along with evidence of the ratification of TONA by the state of Virginia in particular. By August 24th, 1814, the British had burnt the nation's capital, the White House, and the Library of Congress, and most of the records of the first 38 years of government. I wonder why. Why target the nation's legal records? the law library. Would our adversaries want to bury truth? What truth? Anyway, there was a lot of chaos for the head of government due to the War of 1812. Who knows what truth may have been burned or tampered with or become lost in the shuffle during the chaos and wars of that time. James Madison was president from 1809 to 1817 and fled the White House when it was burnt down August 24, 1814. After 4 months of negotiations, the Peace Treaty of Ghent was signed December 24, 1814, and the Senate unanimously ratified that peace treaty February 16, 1815. And if you'll remember, June 18, 1815 was the Battle of Waterloo between England and France. Rothschilds fund both sides. The war machine, or bully, was looking for someone else to pick on pretty quick. The key point to remember here is how quickly and easily they became the single most powerful family in the world from the Battle of Waterloo by fooling the entire London Stock Exchange. It's not so much governments, but their secret, invisible governments that have been responsible for all the wars. Recruiting secret agents in the United States has just become easier and easier for them. Rockefellers were their partners, along with several other super wealthy in the United States. I could list the names of families and companies, but Google and YouTube already do such a good job of that. I'll just stick with the main ones I've known about my whole life, which most people have heard about. History records that the money changers have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit, and violent means possible to maintain control over governments by controlling money and its issuance. James Madison. After President Madison, James Monroe was inaugurated as president March 4, 1817. On New Year's Eve, December 31, 1817, the House of Representatives asked President Monroe to investigate the status of the 13th Amendment. 26 senators and 87 House representatives, 113 voted for and only 4 voted against out of the 117 total. In a letter dated February 6, 1818, President Monroe reported that the Secretary of State, John Quincy Adams, had sent a letter to the governors of South Carolina, Connecticut, and Virginia, informing them that they had record of only 14 states, listing specifically which of the 12 states ratified, according to their records, and listing New York and Rhode Island as the 2 rejecting it, according to their records, and asked these remaining 3 governors for their state's position. Clearly, the new administration did not know for sure about these 3, thus the questions. The letters of February 1818 between President Monroe and Secretary of State John Quincy Adams only indicated that the 13th Amendment had not yet been found to be ratified. And much later, these letters were misinterpreted to mean the 13th Amendment was never ratified. February 28, 1818, the Secretary of State, John Quincy Adams, reported the rejection of the 13th Amendment by South Carolina, which the record shows they had done December 21, 1814. And Connecticut had actually rejected it May 13, 1813. But neither Secretary Adams nor President Monroe had evidence of all the rejections either. The Journals of Congress contain no further entries on the ratification of the original 13th Amendment. Virginia's ratification status remains unverified by Congress, no confirmation or denial, sort of the norm for what our government has turned into today. Some rather interesting points. One state ratified in December 25, 1810, then 10 ratified in 1811, counting Virginia. 2 were ratified in 1812, and the first state to reject it was New York in 1812, then rejected by Connecticut in 1813, then 2 rejected the tail end of 1814, Rhode Island September 15th, 1814, and South Carolina December 21st, 1814. So by the end of 1812, the score was 13-1 if we include Virginia. Then there were 3 more rejections straight, 2 of which at the tail end of 1814 during the 4 months of negotiations to signing the peace treaty. Rhode Island was 3 weeks into negotiations after the White House and Library of Congress were burnt down, and the last one, South Carolina, was just 3 days prior to the signing of the Peace Treaty of Ghent, which was December 24th, 1814. This timeline is very suspicious and suggests the Rothschilds' influence through the War of 1812 with Britain was seriously influencing decisions. With 26 of 27 senators and 87 of 90 House representatives from all 17 states supporting, and so many initial supportive votes, then it seems a massive subversion occurred. Subversion definition: overthrowing something like government or law. The War of 1812 was officially declared in June of 1812. Could a secret agent political spy named Agent Smith or someone else have intentionally intercepted Virginia's mail? Remember, this was before electronic telegraph, let alone when telephones became available. In about only 1 year after the letters between President Monroe and Secretary Adams on March 10, 1819, Virginia passed Act Number 280. Be it enacted by the General Assembly that there shall be published a special edition of laws on this Commonwealth, in which shall be contained the following matters, that is to say, the Constitution of the United States and the amendments thereto. Virginia legislature had agreed all acts would take effect the day their civil code was republished, March 12, 1819, which included the original 13th Amendment. There is no time limitation specified nor notification requirements specified by the Constitution for the states to ratify this amendment. More evidence continues to be uncovered over time, showing that Virginia did ratify it and was perhaps the 7th to ratify it, although we now have evidence that the next time Virginia published their revised codes was March 12, 1819, which listed the original 13th Amendment. Virginia's new published revised legal codes were also sent to the Department of State, Congress, the Library of Congress, and the President. The printing by a legislature is prima facie evidence of ratification, even though the Constitution does not specify a notification requirement, only for 3/4 of the states to ratify. But the original notification or communication from 1811 appears to have been misplaced or subverted during the chaos and wars at the time. By March 12, 1819, it appears that Virginia had become aware of the powerful forces of opposition to the acknowledgement of its ratification, and possibly having evidence that 13 states had ratified the 13th Amendment by December 10, 1812, which was about 6 years and 3 months earlier. In any case, about a year after the letters of February 1818, on March 12, 1819, Virginia boldly became the very first state to publish the Constitution, including the original 13th Amendment. They boldly printed 4,000 copies, triple their normal order, instructing the bonded printer to send copies to President James Monroe and former President James Madison and former President Thomas Jefferson. News of ratification success quickly spread, and thousands of copies of Virginia's first special edition were being ordered by several states. Several states began publishing it on their own from that time. Over the next 41 years, at least 11 states or territories, excluding New York, independently printed the Constitution with the original 13th Amendment. At least 20 separate publications have been found, and likely more will be found. Our founding fathers intended to outlaw abusive public servants who took bribes, titles of nobility, and honors. The original 13th Amendment prohibited both titles of nobility and honors. Most people don't know the definition of honor implied here, and we also need to define a couple of other terms. Online dictionaries define seniority as a feudal lordship or position, authority, or domain of a feudal lord. The feudal system is from ancient times, such as the Middle Ages, and is basically an old master and servant system directly related to the restriction or entitlement of privileges. The definition of feudal lord is an overlord, lord, master, a person who has general authority over others. They were also known as the nobles and landlords. The definition of the word honor, as found at legaldictionary.thefreedictionary.com/honor. As a noun, in Old English law, a seniority of several manors held under one baron or lord paramount. Also, those dignities or privileges, degrees of nobility, knighthood, and other titles that flow from the crown. History teaches us that there have been people who are willing to be bought, people who are for sale, who can be bribed, and for very little money. If you don't know by now, if you think your government, your church, your friends are different, just look what happened with Judas and Jesus Christ. As good as he was, his example shows us how people can be and how people in government can be. I hope we are inspired to be better people. John Adams was the second president. His son, John Quincy Adams, was the Secretary of State under President Monroe. And John Quincy Adams succeeded Monroe as the sixth president. Prior to that, John Quincy Adams admitted to the bar in 1790 and practiced law in Boston. I am unsure, but I've scrubbed every source that I can find, and I cannot find any bar existing in the United States in 1790. So the only one that I can think of, it suggests to me, it's very likely that he admitted to the bar in London. Anyway, he had spent a large part of his life in Europe, beginning at 10 years of age. He served as secretary to his father through the negotiation of peace that ended the Revolutionary War. He was assigned to head the 5-person delegation empowered to negotiate the peace agreement ending the War of 1812, and was subsequently posted to the English court for 2 years. He helped formulate Monroe Doctrine, which warned European nations not to meddle in Western Hemisphere affairs. He left a fairly overall positive reputation with his political career, although he had a very messy re-election campaign against Andrew Jackson for his second term as president in 1829 and lost the election anyway. So it may have been better for him to avoid it. Is it possible that John Quincy Adams was afraid that he couldn't hold public office if the original 13th Amendment were recognized as ratified? He was Secretary of State under James Monroe, 1817 to 1825, and succeeded him as president. After confusion of the War of 1812, he may have been tempted to see how easy it could be to hide correspondence from Virginia. This is suspicious. There were likely several conspirators. I'm not saying it was all him, but he is at least a suspect here. And I know he did some good things as president, but apparently it wasn't all good. And when we look at the facts, one of the oldest and most subtle tricks in the book is to take a bunch of good and truth and persuade people to support it, and then twist it at the top to use it to manipulate people. How many secret societies do that? The biggest battle we have to fight is within ourselves. The early settlers came to America for freedom, but took the same systems with them from where they came from. The rules of legal procedure from England were adopted as the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, the FRCP, in the United States, written by the same people who own and control the World Bank. The Rothschild family, formerly known as the Bauer family, Mayor Amschel Bauer, changed his last name to Rothschild, which is German for Red Shield, after their family crest. So this is the same Rothschild we quoted earlier. Look at the history of Standard Oil Trust, which was divided up into many, many companies, including the Seven Sisters that control the oil monopolies still today. And read the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, if you want to be familiar with world events.